Hello everybody, welcome to this week's Google Maps Developers Office Hours, or Google Maps Developers Lives. I'm Paul Saxman, and
I'm Mano Marks.
And this week, Mano, you don't need an introduction because like we were just talking about, you are kind of the face of maps. But in any event, so this week we're going to just rattle through a bunch of updates this week, or actually that happened over the last few weeks. There's been a lot of things going on in the Google Maps developers world, and we just want to make sure that you guys are well aware of everything that's been going on. Just to kick things off and get going, very first thing is the more than a map. Last week we talked about it at the Google Developers or Google Maps Developers Live. Luke and Chris were here to kind of give a talk about kind of the technology behind it. If you haven't seen the site, it has a lot of great information for developers. Particularly, if you go to the site, you can see quite a few demos. Now we have demos of kind of a lot of the core features of the Maps API, including things like satellite imagery, street view, the routing in places, and data visualization. Each of these has kind of a really nice feature set that you can kind of go over. In this case, this is the Places API. You can see searching on different locations. You can search on different types of information. Everything is centered around a certain geographic area. So I don't think this demo does it, but switching my search type, I can find, this one does still say centered, but restaurants, lodging. The Places API has quite a few different place types. Other samples that we have in here, other demos that we have in here. We can go over to satellite imagery. Really interesting site if you haven't seen it already. The cool thing that Luke and Chris talked about last week, if you weren't there, was that this actually uses one map for actually all of these demos. So that's a really nice tidbit for developers to know about, because you can actually reproduce the same thing. Instead of reloading the map every time somebody accesses the page, you can actually keep it running in JavaScript in the background. So,
and they don't want us to tell you this, but that reduces your map loads.
Oh yeah, that's the implicit benefit of all that. So in addition to the demos, be sure to check out the developer stories. These are actually pretty inspiring stories. I'm not going to run any of them now. But they're really good stories about developers using the Maps products and doing things kind of benefiting their community and what they think about the APIs. So the site is morethanamap.com. If you haven't seen it yet. Next up, we have the, actually I'm going to go off my tabs, the Google Places API Developer Challenge. Just today, actually, we updated the time frame for the challenge. We've actually gotten quite a few good submissions so far, and I think, well, actually I didn't mention them last week at the GDL, but we've gotten quite a few good submissions, but we're looking to actually collect a few more. Some of the feedback we got from developers was that they just need a little bit more time. So the new time frame is November 30th for getting the application submitted, and the voting's actually bumped into December. So December 12th to the 31st is going to be the public voting. We'll have a website up for the public to actually use to vote. The important part about this is, as a developer, if you're submitting something to the challenge, you need a YouTube video. So be sure to put a quick YouTube video together and get your submissions in. Voting by the judges continues through the first of the year, or through January 11th, and then the winners will be announced at the end of January next year. So if you're not familiar with the challenge, I think we talked about it last week and a couple weeks before, but check out developers.google.com/places/challenge. All the links, More Than a Map, Places Challenge, all the other stuff we're going to talk about today, we'll put them in the comments on the YouTube stream, so don't worry about writing them down. Next up, a couple events coming up this week, actually this upcoming weekend. So actually me and Brendan Kinney are going to be at the DevFest West, and that's this Saturday and Sunday at actually the Google campus. If you want to attend, it appears that there's still quite a few tickets available, 66 tickets. They're $5 a piece. Seems like a pretty good deal to come hang out with us on the weekend. We're going to be talking, Brendan and I are going to be talking about big data and Google Maps. So how do you get large amounts of data on a map? Specifically, that's going to be talking about heat maps, symbols. Let me see if I know heat map symbols, and canvas layer, which is a library that Brendan's been working on. Brendan and Mano have been working on. We had a GDL a few weeks ago, talking about the canvas layer. It's a really cool technology for using WebGL on top of a map. So, and Mano, you're going to be someplace else.
I'm going to be at DevFest Silicon Valley, which will be Friday and Saturday. I'll be there on Friday. I think they're still updating their schedule. That's more of a hackathon-focused DevFest. I'll be talking about some basically the same stuff. I think I titled it differently, like the new advanced features of the Maps API, but it's basically the visualization and canvas layer, heat maps, symbols, that sort of stuff. So that kind of stuff I think is really exciting, and really makes Maps API in the browser just so much more useful. So. If you can get to DevFest Silicon Valley, I will be there on Friday.
Is there so there's registration right here, big green button, and looks like it's
looks like there's still spots.
Yep, still spots available. So so Brendan and I are on Saturday. I think it's at 10:30 a.m. at the DevFest West, and you're going to be talking on Friday at.
I think it's going to be 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. Yeah. Cool. All right, moving on. What do we have next? Google Developers Academy.
So Google Developers Academy launched right around I/O this year, and we now have 4 courses in Google Developers Academy for Google Maps. We haven't really done any big announcements about this up until now, so we're pretty excited to show that off. There's a course on getting started with the Google Places API, one on customizing Google Maps, changing the color, styles, custom markers, that sort of thing. We have one on importing data, so essentially how to use JSON-P and XML HTTP requests to bring in your own data. Some very sort of basic JavaScript stuff, but really essential for people who are learning both JavaScript and the Maps API at the same time, which is a pretty common thing. And then finally, there's one on the visualization using the symbols and heat maps that we've been talking about. So there's these are some great courses. We'll put links up to them in the comments on the YouTube video, and check these out. These are kind of unknown. We haven't gotten very many hits because we haven't done any advertising yet, but they're up and ready for you to go on them.
Yeah, and as Mano mentioned, so actually I did the Google Places one before I was actually on the Google Places team. That was around I/O time. So we got a lot of questions about things like. Actually, I got a lot of questions when I was joining the team about using the autocomplete service with the Android application. So we do have an Android sample in there. And really another interesting thing, so the visualizing data. If you can't make it to one of the talks we talked about this week, or that we mentioned earlier, that's going on this weekend, you probably want to check this out because there's going to be a little bit of overlap. But definitely, if you can make the talks, we'd definitely love to have you there. So.
Yep.
And actually, these other ones, I should probably read a couple of these. I'll probably learn a thing or two. So moving on. So the other thing, I think it was 2 GDLs ago, we talked about some updates to the Google Places API. Specifically, we have Query Autocomplete. So Query Autocomplete allows it's an autocomplete service, like the pre-existing autocomplete service, where you provide an input box. And as the user types into the input box, the service actually will display up to 5 autocomplete results. And the existing autocomplete API returned only addresses, or actually you could specify types, but it so you could return addresses, name places, or the like. The new service, actually, the query autocomplete, this is an extension beyond the existing service, actually includes search terms as well, or query terms. So a classic example that we always, let me zoom this guy in a little bit. So a classic example that we always have is pizza, because a lot of people search on pizza. So you can see here that, so we have, actually this is just a query term. So pizza is a query term. We actually have places returned. And it actually looks like these are also terms as well. So we interleave like popular query terms with popular places. So you can put these in an autocomplete box. The results actually that you get back from the service is a list of places. So these are places that match the keyword pizza as opposed to matching a particular place. So looks like here we all have restaurants, but I wonder what's a good search term that would be both like restaurants and, let's say, grocery stores or...
Well, I don't know, but you are looking in Sydney, so I don't know if kangaroo would...
Yeah. No, looks like they don't have many... In any event, we'll see if we can come up with a good demo. Take a quick peek at the code. Let me just switch over to my IDE here. So the code's pretty straightforward, just like the autocomplete service. You provide your input box. So here's where we're actually getting the input target down here, the text input. You actually pass that to the search box service, or the search box class or object, and provide a callback function. So as the user types this in, the callback functions, or actually as the user submits the search, your callback function is made or called. And here you can see we're just, we're creating markers, and we're placing the markers on the map. And so, and these markers, kind of interesting thing about this is it's actually using the place image. So images, actually, the places service returns images for places, and that's based like on the little icons we saw earlier. And based on, then it's also positioned by the geometry of the place itself. So pretty straightforward. I mean, this whole sample that we saw is like 84 lines of code, including the map code. The other service that or other addition to the Google Places API that we released recently was this is the autocomplete data service. So this actually works a lot like the autocomplete box or the search box, except that you actually get access to the data before it's actually rendered into the input box. So previously with the search box or the autocomplete is you just provide it the text area, and it does the actual rendering of the selection list or the list of predictions. Here you actually get to render the predictions yourself. So if I do let's say 1600, let's get a little more. So here you can see this looks a little bit differently. That's because this is actually being rendered by our code, and all we did here is we just highlighted the search term in the query autocomplete results. So nice thing about this is you can actually do what we're doing here, highlighting the code. You can actually control what the prediction selection looks like. But B, you can also interleave your own results. So if you have information that you think is more relevant than what we're returning, or you want to actually include that in the autocomplete results, you can feel free to do so. Code for that is likewise pretty straightforward. I had these backwards. Data service. So again, this time you create the autocomplete service, and you provide a callback listener. And that callback actually gets the list of predictions. So the predictions are the list of places, essentially. And then you actually can display those however you like. And here, so all we're doing is we're taking the callback or the results, and we're highlighting and putting them in the div to display them. What else is interesting? This sample's a little more complex. I think it just has a little more styling. We had to go through all the styling of the autocomplete box, and then also, you have to control what happens when the user clicks on the prediction. But pretty straightforward. We'll post the links to both of these samples in the comments or in the description for the YouTube video. And Mano, you're up.
So we had 2 more launches. The first one here is time zones. So this is a new web service API that allows you to query Google servers. You pass it a UTC timestamp and a latitude and longitude, and it returns back to you information about where what the actual time was at that location. So if you, I've got a couple of links here. If you click this particular one, for instance, it shows you what the offset is from standard time. So this is Los Angeles, and the raw offset is it's in seconds, I guess. So you just pull that, divide by 60, and you get number of minutes, and then 60 again, you get number of hours. So this was a common request. So that's what it looks like in JSON, and then if you can also get it back in XML if you like, if you prefer that. So here you see the information there, and of course we also pass back to you the time zone names. So we decided to do this because we got a lot of requests for it. People want to know what the time zone is at a particular location, and it's fairly complex because time zones have lots of different rules, and they change, when daylight savings time is, or whether they even support daylight savings time, and whatnot, in all sorts of different ways. And then there's crazy little townships that don't support daylight savings time, so when things shift, that one town stays an hour later or earlier than somewhere else. So we keep track of all that for you. And like most web services, it's limited to 2,500 calls a day. And if you have Maps API for Business, it's 100,000 calls per day. So
it's an interesting point. I should have brought up about the query autocomplete and the data services. Is that actually, I think those were a couple of the top developer requests that we kind of picked off and implemented. So
yeah.
So one thing I always think is always a little curious about our services. We actually don't JSON-P wrap our results, right? So
right.
So that, what do you do for that? Is this also part of the JavaScript library for the Maps API, or?
No, and I don't believe time zones is currently in the JavaScript library. It's web services only, but you can run it server side and pull it and then send it back.
Yep, and potentially also put your own wrapper around it, so you could, if you want it in your JavaScript code, put a JSON-P call around it.
Yeah, right. So the other thing that we launched, and this is for enterprise customers only, we added traffic conditions to driving directions. So if you take a look here, you might, I don't know if you can actually zoom in on the traffic conditions. It's in the...
You drive. You drive on our driving directions.
So basically, here, section I'm highlighting here, just says, about 1 hour and 22 minutes or 1 hour and 26 minutes in current traffic. Well, this sample happens to be in Australia, so there's not a lot of traffic there right now. But it gives you, based on current and historical traffic. So estimates, whether if we're getting current traffic conditions or based on what we know about that at a particular time of day. So it's pretty powerful, and actually the code for it is very simple. Same standard creating a driving directions, which is available to everybody for your enterprise customers. And then you create a driving directions service and pass it a request with a bunch of options. And you'll see here, all you have to do is highlight one particular option. Here you add in this duration in traffic true, and then it passes that back to you. So that's traffic, and I think that kind of wraps up our roundup here. We're super excited. If you want to see more of these kind of things as they're being launched, follow our Google Geo Developers blog. And also, we announce things on our Google Plus page, and usually something goes out on our Twitter feed as well. So I think that's all I got.
That's everything. So check the description. We're going to post all the links, and if you guys have any questions, also you can post in the YouTube comments, and we'll see if we can get back to you on those. So
right, or post on the Google Plus page, and we'll answer those as well. So,
okay.
All right.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks for joining.